How's it going? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Iona, where I live.
Okay, is that in Scotland? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the in the Hebrides.
Hebrides, right? Okay. Fair play. How long you been up there? I know you're from Scotland, obviously, but
Oh yeah, I'm Scottish. That's one, one of my defining features.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
just that part of
yeah,
Scotland,
no,
I guess.
but yeah, it's the west coast of Scotland, the islands. Yeah,
Okay, cool. Have you kind of lived all over? Has music taken you all over, really? Or have you always been based in Scotland, really?
yeah. Well, I mean, I lived in London and New York and Glasgow and Edinburgh, but yeah, largely most of my life been in Scotland.
Okay.
Are we doing it as an interview? No.
Yeah, if that's all right.
Okay, cool.
Um, so yeah, I mean, am I right in thinking 30 years since the band started this year? Is that right? Oh, I've kind of formed.
Yeah, it's been we formed in 1995, so yeah, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah. And what was the build up to that? Obviously, bands I usually talk to, like this podcast is based around bands that were prominent in the 2000s, really. But I guess you kind of kicked off before that. So you might have different influences to the bands I usually speak to. Like, what was,
Yeah, well, to be honest, I probably associate Idlewild more with the 90s, really.
yeah,
Although we did have our biggest commercial success and kind of like from 2002 to 2005, that's the kind of era where I suppose we were in the mainstream, if you want to call it that. But largely our identity was formed in the 90s. We formed in 95, but like, I'd been playing in bands since about 92. So, uh, and there was so much great music around then, like if you were a teenager, it was like a proper, like a gold mine of like riches, from like, particularly for me, I was really interested in like underground rock and roll. I got into that when I was in late 80s, really. I lived in America in the late 80s and I was exposed to loads of stuff like all the Discord bands and SST and Sonic Youth and Mudhoney and all these groups. So when Nirvana became massive in the early 90s, and all the bands, Pavement, um, you know, Danish Fan Club, just I mean, there's so many. It was a really fertile time to be a music fan of that kind of music. And Idlewild came from that, really. We came out of that influence, and we were all those kind of kids that were just obsessed with these kind of bands. And we made music that sounded a bit like that throughout the 90s, and then eventually it kind of modified into this kind of more, I guess, like widescreen kind of, not mainstream, because it was never purposely mainstream, but it became something different in the noughties, yeah.
all right. What took you to America in the 80s then?
Oh, I lived quite a few places when I was younger through my dad's work. He worked for Michelin tire company, so they used to move around lots. I lived in France and England um, and back to France and America. Yeah, we moved around a lot when I was younger.
Okay. Was that quite, I don't know, informative in terms of your music, do you think? In terms of songwriting?
Really, I mean, of course, I mean, all the experiences you have throughout your life, if you're artistic in any way, they inform that. That's where you get your basically your ideas from through your experience, your life experience. And so, yeah, I went to like 10 different schools. So, uh, I got used to my own company and I've found real solace in music and books and films. And I guess I knew I wanted to be an artist from a really young age because of that experience. And obviously living in America in the late 80s at high school, I mean, I'm sure you've seen some of the sort of John Hughes films from the 80s, like The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, all that kind of. That was my experience. It just felt like that. It was really like those films are really well observed because that's what it was like at the American high school in the 80s. But there was always cool people into music, and that's where I discovered all these bands that I still love.
Yeah, yeah. So did you form any kind of school bands then in America or anything like that?
Yeah, that's where I formed my first band. I formed my first band because I had a pal and we found this drum kit in his attic that belonged to his father. And he didn't even neither of us knew how to set it up. And this was obviously before YouTube or the internet in the late 80s. And I remember that evening watching on television Hard Day's Night by the Beatles was on TV. And I just watched Ringo Starr, how his drum kit was set up and how he was playing it. So the next time we met up together, I was like, I set the drum kit up that same way. I just played it the way that Ringo Starr played it. Like, like I guess it was the cross hand tab, the basic thing. And then we formed a band from that, but neither of us could play. And his brother was drafted in on bass. And then eventually I gave them a Minor Threat. I love Minor Threat, the band, punk band. And we just tried to rip Minor Threat off. So for my first band was basically like three teenage boys trying to rip off Minor Threat.
Yes. And then when it comes to forming Idlewild, is that at school still or college or something?
Oh no, that's much older than, I'm
Right, right.
talking about in the 80s. I'm talking like I was 13, 14 here. So I moved back to Scotland in 91. And I went back to high school and finished high school and had a few bands at school, high school, and that was in Carnoustie, which is near Dundee on the east coast of Scotland. My parents are all Dundonians, so um, Dundee was that was kind of like the place that everyone in my family's from. So we lived very close to Dundee, and then I went to university in Edinburgh in '95 to study photography. Um, I really wanted to do painting, but I didn't get into painting, so I did photography instead. So there wasn't really like a photography enthusiast. I had a camera and ideas, I suppose. So and that's where I met within like a few months and met Colin and Rod, who I formed Idlewood with. So I would have been like 19 years old.
Okay. And like, what was the music scene like in Edinburgh? Was it quite a vibrant one?
Well, there wasn't a music scene in Edinburgh. That was the interesting thing about it. And I didn't realize I'd been going to a lot of shows in Edinburgh because there was a great venue called the Venue underneath Waverley train station in one of the arches. I'd seen loads of great American bands there in sort of the years previous. I would drive through with my friends, I'd get the bus through and watch these bands. Um, I moved to Edinburgh because it was more familiar with it than Glasgow. I didn't really know Glasgow that well. But after being in Edinburgh for like a year, quite a few of my friends would be going to Glasgow quite a lot. And that's how I started eventually like ended up moving there a few years into the band because that just was where the music scene in Scotland was based in Glasgow. But to go back for forming Idlewild in Edinburgh, therefore, was actually quite interesting because there was no other bands. Basically, it's like one or two other bands, and there was no really to play as well. We found a place and we played there every like 2 weeks called the Cast Rock Cafe. But we got noticed a lot quicker because of that. Because if we'd be formed in Glasgow, there would probably be about 10 bands that sounded a bit like us. But there was nothing in Edinburgh that sounded like Idlewild, so we got noticed quite quickly.
Okay. Did he kind of curate a scene around you then, kind of thing? Or not really?
No, there wasn't enough. A scene needs people, doesn't it? So there wasn't
Hmm.
enough. In Glasgow, there was that was a really good time for the Glaswegian music scene because there was, Mogwai and Arab Strap and Bell Sebastian and the Delgados, Eska, Hiatus, all these bands. They were all starting at the same time, and it was really exciting. If you went through and you could go to see all these bands play together. But Edinburgh was nothing like that. But we were kind of left to our own devices almost. We had this place that we played every few weeks, and we just kind of had a local fan base. And because we weren't associated with Glasgow or known as a Glasgow band, I suppose it kind of made us a wee bit unique in that way. Not like, our music was, but we were definitely influenced by a lot of the same bands that all the Glasgow bands were influenced by. But just by virtue of not actually being from Glasgow, we had kind of something that was a bit unique about us.
And how quickly we kind of getting label interest from that point then? I guess it was quite I don't know, prolific time for the music industry at that point. I don't know really.
Well, it was a strange time for the music industry, because it was the kind of last time there was a lot of money in the music industry. Not like I profess to know too much about the music industry, but there was a few bands that we knew that had been signed. Like there was one Edinburgh band called Magic Drive, and they got signed for quite a large record deal. And they seemed to be making a record for ages, and I'm not even sure if it was released. But this was the era when bands would be signed, and they would be put into a studio with a producer, and then the records wouldn't, that would be unheard of now. But there was still a lot of money that people were spending. A&R men would come up regularly to Scotland to see what bands were about. But we were a bit kind of, we didn't realize all that. We were just very naive. For us, music wasn't a career. It was an artistic project. It was an exchange of ideas. It was something we did creatively together. Um, and we knew we were quite good after probably about 6 months of playing because we had a chemistry and our concerts were, chaotic and exciting, and we sort of thrived off that kind of chaos. and people started wanting to come and see us because of that. But we had no notions of sort of professionalism, no way of recording ourselves or anything like you can do that now. So it took us a wee while before we even went to our demo studio. But as soon as we did, I mean, our first demo was basically our first single, more or less. So yeah, I mean, it went. Idlewild are like a band, like I guess there's quite a lot of bands formed around the same period as us that were really allowed to be a live band for a long time before we were kind of judged as our studio band, where we're basically like a live band. And I guess it's just the way I still approach it. Really, everything has to sound good live first before it's going to sound good anywhere else.
Yeah, did that kind of benefit the band in terms of building momentum, do you think? And like building a little fan base?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's kind of old-fashioned now, almost in that way. But I'm sure people still do that. But it certainly felt for us that the only way we could really understand what even our abilities was just to by playing concerts regularly. And then songs would come out of that. Songs would come out of that, the minute you started kind of having a bit more confidence in the way you're playing, which you got through playing live, you'd be able to start with, because we never did cover versions. That was the thing about Idlewild, or actually any band I've been in. We've never tried to play covers. We always just started with trying to do our own thing because you're not judging it against anything else. Um, and if you try to do a cover version that's not sounding good, you start feeling like maybe we're not that good. But you're just trying to write songs. They don't have to be great songs, but they're your songs. So instantly you feel more kind of, I don't know, like everything feels a bit more, like you've accomplished something more. Um, and that's what playing live did for us. So just every time we played live, we just improved. So by the time that we, started getting interest from people, we put a few 7-inch singles on local labels, which is quite what a lot of bands did. That was not an unusual thing back then. We felt like we kind of knew who we were. So when all these labels would started approaching us or coming up to Scotland to see us or meet us, we felt like we didn't have to. We just felt like, but I don't mean confidence in a cocky way, but we had a confidence about um what we were as a band.
Yeah, did you have an idea of the type of label you wanted to sign with, or how did it go?
No, I mean, again, I would just be looking at the records I liked, and I was looking on the back of them and see who they're put out by. But most of the records I like were American, and on independent labels in America. So obviously that wasn't going to happen for Idlewild. I guess I was definitely much more drawn to independent um, labels because that's the kind of music that I listen to. But we ended up signing to EMI, which is a bit the opposite from an independent label. But we realized that we'd put out a couple of 7-inch singles and a mini album on Deceptive Records. So we'd established ourselves with independent labels. And we just felt the advice we were getting from all the people that were around about us by that point was like, why not? Do you know what I mean? You're getting these offers. Just see where it takes you. Um, and we really liked the A&R guy from Good Records, Matthew. So we basically signed to them because we liked him. We sort of trusted him. So, and he did a great job with Idlewild.
Yeah, and you say it's like the last era of like kind of big money in music. Was that something you felt the impact of at the time?
Well, we were advised, we had a really great, well, he's still Idlewild's manager, Bruce Craigie. He worked at Deceptive Records. So he put out Captain, which was our very first album. Um, and he was basically managing us before we had like a manager. And eventually he said, I'll just manage you because he was sort of doing that such a good job of kind of guiding us through all this because we were, guys from Scotland that didn't really have a clue about the music industry, but had a good band, that were like people were interested in. Um, and the advice was always like I said before, there was lots of bands that were being kind of like this sort of metaphorical carrot was being dangled in front of them of lots of money. But um, as a Scottish person, you have a kind of inbuilt distrust of that kind of thing because of a skepticism. So we were always a wee bit weird, especially a lot of the guys from London, Not to generalize, but like, you know, the music industry types were, you know, just what you'd expect, you know, late 90s, London A&R types. So we were very kind of wary of that. So we signed a very modest record deal, really, in context, but it was for 4 records, and it was pretty much, you know, they were going to sort of stay behind that. They were going to build the band over 4 records, which we realized was important for us because weren't the kind of band that we didn't know who we were really enough to make the first record into like this. Do you know what I mean? Like the first Strokes record or whatever is like an essence of what the band is, and they've kind of never improved on it. Whereas with Idlewild, we really felt like we'd need a few records to kind of even work out how to record songs in the studio. So luckily we signed a 4 album deal, and yeah, and that obviously took us through into the mid noughties.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of songs, did you have? I mean, the first, like you say, Captain, is that classed as like a mini album?
I class it as an album simply because it was all the songs we had at that point. It was supposed to be a single, turned into an EP, ended up being a mini album because it was 6 songs, but it was still nearly half an hour. So I've always classed it as our first album. Um, and then, you know, when we signed, we actually made like a longer record, Hope Was Important. But Captain to me is, you know, early, if people talk about early Idlewild, I think of Captain and Hope Was Important.
And did you have quite a like a wealth of songs at that point, or was it just were you writing on the spot once you got the record deal for?
We wrote well, when we were younger, we would write songs very quickly and we'd kind of label them as songs like straight away. Like that's a song. Whereas, you know, it wasn't really, it was just like, so we'd all, within that, would also dismiss things really quickly too, you know. So there would be like lots and lots of sort of quote unquote songs written, and only very, very few of them would kind of stick towards, you know, like even like would write songs and play them in gigs, and if people didn't clap, would never play them again. So it was very much that, that philosophy, which you don't have the more you get better at songwriting and realize there's a kind of craft to it and you have to work on it a little bit. We didn't have that because we're just sort of young and naive and in a very kind of creative, exciting way, I suppose, as well. So Captain was like the 6 best songs we had from all that period. And then Hope is Important. We'd actually, you know, by that point we'd signed and we actually spent, you know, we didn't have jobs anymore. We were full-time musicians, so we'd actually could spend like all the time writing songs. And that's how we quickly got a lot better. Um, because we had that. That's another advantage of like have a signing to a major label allowed us not to have jobs. So we could actually just be a full-time band, which was amazing. And we really never took that for granted. And we'd go into our practice room whenever we could and write songs. And that's how there's a real jump from Captain to What Was Important and a much bigger jump from What Was Important to 100 Broken Windows. Because we're quite disciplined in that way. We were very like well, still am, just really into being in a band and writing songs and performing them.
Yeah, did the songwriting process stay the same or not really from the early
Well,
days?
no, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, it's still sort of similar. It's very much like, you know, we work together as a band. There's an initial idea, and then it's developed by everyone together. And then, you know, when we finish it off in a studio, that's still kind of how we work. Um, there have been records when it's been more like it's paired off into people like Rod and I, for example, would come up with a lot of the ideas, or a few of the records is different songwriting partnerships. So just because there's 5 people in the band, you know, like, and then, but ultimately they're always finished off equally and split equally. It's always been kind of, we've always worked like that. There's no one person that writes the songs for Idlewild. It's like, it's all of us.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, did it feel like a steady rise from that point of getting the record deal then in terms of success and bigger shows type thing? How did it work?
Um, well, we got a record deal in 97, end of 97 and 1998, sorry. We just went on tour. We were on tour in the van most of the year, just support tours. We did like 4 or 5 different support tours. And in between, we'd be writing and recording. And I Hope It's Important came out at the end of that year, and we did our own headline tour. We went to America and Japan, and it really felt like, you know, we worked hard, but we really felt like we'd actually achieved something at the end of the year. And then we went straight into writing 100 Broken Windows in 1999, recorded that, which came out in 2000. And then, you know, we toured that and then we went straight away. We were on a conveyor belt for 15 years, Idlewild. was like, it wasn't until 2010 when we took a break. Obviously by that point we'd kind of gone up there and now we were kind of going down. I don't mean in terms of artistically, but obviously the spotlight's only ever on a band for a period of time. And you make what you can of it when the spotlight's on you in terms of fans and etc. And then you see where you are when it leaves you, see how intact you are. And that was, luckily we were in a really good place creatively and could carry on being a band. But so yeah, I suppose with Idlewild it was kind of old fashioned in a way that it did take us about 3 records to be like popular. And we were steadily gaining fans and becoming more and more like a less and less of a sort of cult band and more of a kind of, I suppose, like a mainstream sort of proposition for radio stations and TV programs and things like that. Started paying attention to the band.
Yeah, and I got some questions from fans and the likes. I want to slip them in. Got one from the Mardoos, who you might know from Edinburgh. They shared a producer, Paul Tippler.
All right.
But they ask fondest memories of Edinburgh around the first 2 albums.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I suppose I lived in Edinburgh from 95 to 97. So that would have been, I'd moved away before, really, I moved away before we did, Hope was important. So it was very early when I lived in Edinburgh. Yeah, I mean, have you been to Edinburgh before?
I know I haven't. I've only been to Dundee and Stirling, weirdly.
Wow. Well, the two sort of, I mean, I like Dundee and Stirling, but I mean, you normally you go Glasgow or Edinburgh if you go.
Yeah, I've not been to either of them. Yeah, weird.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful city. I mean, it's like, sort of jaw-droppingly beautiful. It's got a massive castle in the middle of it and all this beautiful Georgian architecture and, medieval architecture. So, yeah, I mean, that's my main memories of it, really. It's just that feeling of like one of excitement of moving away from home, studying art subject, meeting interesting people that you never met at school, and then just playing music in clubs and pubs and um, there was just just the excitement of being young, really. I associate that with Edinburgh, even though when I walk around Edinburgh now, I mean, I'm no longer young, but I still get that kind of feel from it as a place, simply because my memories are so intertwined with it. So I do have great memories of it. But one thing I do, we had a practice room in Broughton Street, underneath a cafe called Doll's Diner, and it was a bit of a dive, but I loved that, and I lived around the corner for a while, right at a flat around the corner. I've got good memories of that because it was literally like in the morning you'd wake up and then you just go to the practice room and practice, and then there was a pub across the road called the Barney Bar, which we basically kind of lived in half the time between that and the practice room. Yeah, I love it as a city. I'm not there very often. I mean, Rod, who at Jones Idlewild guitar player, he has a studio in Leith, which is part of Edinburgh now, but it was always a bit further out than when in the 90s when I was there. No one went to Leith, but now a lot of people live there. That's where he lives, and he's got a studio there. So I'm there quite often when we're working on stuff. But actually in Edinburgh, I'm wandering around, and I don't do that very often. And when I do, I love it.
Yeah, I've actually been to Inverness as well. I just remembered I went there for.
Ah,
You remember Rock Nest, the festival?
I do. Yeah, yeah. I
Went
never
there.
played at it, but yeah.
We drove up all the way from Hull to Inverness to watch the Strokes. Rock
Oh
Nest.
wow. Oh
Good times.
wow. You
But
live in
yeah,
Hull?
I used to. I'm from Hull. I live in Manchester now.
Oh, okay.
But
My
yeah.
granddad was from Hull.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's where
Whereabouts in
I think that's where the name Woomble comes from.
Wimble?
That's my surname, Woomble.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
That's where, like, 'cause he was granddad Wimble was from Hull.
Ah, fair. Do you ever visit much?
No, I've only been there once in my life, and that was to play a concert.
Ah, okay. I wonder
Um,
what venue that was.
it was like an industrial estate that had been turned into kind of arts venues.
All right. I
It's
was
like
going to
this,
say
well,
Adelphi, but it doesn't sound
when
like
it
it.
was was it a city of culture Hull for a while or for a
Yeah,
year.
yeah. So quite recently then, was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so it was a solo gig. Well, I played with a few musicians, but so it was like they'd reclaimed this sort of industrial area and turned it into venues for the city of culture.
Ah, yeah.
It was cool. Actually, Idaho played in Hull with the Doves not that long ago.
Ah, yes. Again, I wonder where that was, but I don't know. I wonder
It
if
was
that was
in
the new
like
place.
a square in the city somewhere.
Ah, right. What, outdoors?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Yeah, they did. Mardu's did say, "Can we support you on any upcoming tours?" So I needed to mention that.
Well, we've only got one upcoming tour, and got some support for that, I think.
Okay, I did try Ross. Yeah, obviously, like with the resurgence of I don't know, everything around Britpop, and was that anything you were interested in at the time or not really?
No, actually, and I do think that, to be honest, like Idlewild were kind of like a reaction to that. You know, like other than Blur, who I liked before anyway. I mean, I'd liked Blur from before Modern Life is Rubbish. Um, yeah, we didn't like any of those bands. I mean, that's not to say they were bad bands or like whatever, or as a cultural movement, it wasn't really important for loads of people. I realize it was, you know, but we were influenced by American bands, and you know, when you're it was maybe music was a bit more tribal then in a way that, you know, nowadays you can access lots of stuff. So, you know, my son, for example, as a teenager, has a really varied music taste because he can listen to so much stuff. Like we couldn't really do that. So, you loved the stuff that you know, you loved your bands, and when you met someone that loved those bands, they were almost part of your little tribe, you know. And I'd not saying that's a good thing, but that's what it was like. So, Britpop was like, no, it just wasn't. I just wasn't. It wasn't it. And our band were like a kind of reaction to that, almost like we were influenced by American records, indie rock, punk rock. Obviously, there was I love the Smiths, obviously, and they were one of my favorite bands, and Blur, and obviously Jesus and Mary Jane. I'm not saying it was like we were anti like bands from Scotland and England, but I just mean largely we were American influenced, and we wanted our band to sound like that. And there was lots of bands that did sound like Britpop bands, so we were, you know, straight away we stood out from that.
Yeah, I was watching an interview. It wasn't yourself, but a member of the band said that you've never been in step with what's been popular in guitar music. Is that something you go along with?
Yeah, I guess we've always been a wee bit out of step with everything, you know, which has been frustrating at times, but also it's probably why we're still making music 30 years later, you know. We've never really been fashionable, but because of that, we've never been like out, you know, out of fashion.
Yeah, yeah. And what was your relationship like with the music press, like people like NME type thing?
I think largely it was good. I mean, obviously, in the Enemy in the 90s was a bit more kind of volatile. Like, you know, it was easy to get a very bad review, and it would be like a 2,000 word one. You know, so it would be like, you know, which is quite impressive now from a writing point of view, just to write like a vitriolic kind of 2,000 word review about how you don't like something. That wouldn't really be tolerated now. I don't think people have moved on from that kind of world, but so that's what we were in. So we would be like, but generally speaking, we made friends with people at the music press in terms of, I don't mean like we were trying to be like, we were just kind of ourselves. You know, we're not posturing, or I think people responded to that in a positive way. And also because, you know, our music was getting better and better. I think obviously people realized that. It doesn't take, you know, you don't have to know a lot about music to put on Captain, then put on Broken Windows, and realize that there's a lot of progress and a lot of new ideas, and the band are really turning into something different. So I think people, you know, people realized that. So yeah, I mean, the broadsheets, you know, like those kind of newspapers at the time didn't pay attention to Idlewild. To them, they were a bit young and a bit kind of studenty or something, I don't know, but it was the NME and the Melody Maker were really kind of our champions, and Kerrang magazine too, for many years. And obviously over the years we got attention from lots of press, but we were, yeah, kind of NME Melody Maker band.
Yeah, do you think you're quite hard to categorize in terms of genre, I guess? I don't know. They didn't fit into a particular, I mean, you've already mentioned it, but you didn't fit into a particular genre that they could talk about.
I think, yeah, maybe perhaps. I think there was maybe an element of yeah, I guess we were, so we started off very abrasive and I guess like punk rock, kind of punk pop, if you want to call it. That was, and it was very definitive. The songs were short, the concerts were chaotic. It was like, you know, energetic, and everyone was jumping around. and then didn't take that long for suddenly to be things. Everything was quite melodic and lots of harmonies and less distortion. So I suppose we moved quite quickly from one to the other, like, from a captain to the remote part. There's only like 4 years. So that's really not that long when you think about it. When there's like 4 albums and lots of touring, and but like I said before, that's the reason why it was, because we were so concentrated on what we were doing. We improved very quickly. I'd say improved. I mean, a lot of people prefer those early raw records when it's full of energy and ideas and nothing's really that refined. That appeals to people a lot, some people a lot more than listen to American English. And I get that. I get that, completely. But from my point of view, as the person that's like going on that journey through songs, and I just think it's interesting to think of how much we changed in that time.
Yeah, it's a good moment to mention another fan question got one from Kieran Thompson on Patreon, who said, "Love Idlewild. Which of their early punk tracks would they play live the most now if they could? I personally love the track Self Healer."
Yeah, well, we did like a few shows for the band's 25th anniversary, which was in 2020, but we had to, well, it was actually ended up being the year after because of all the COVID lockdowns. But we did one show in a little club in Edinburgh when we performed Captain with Bob, who was the original bass player in Idlewild. And it was just really, it was almost like comedy. How, like, because obviously we were in our mid-40s at that point, how it was so difficult to pull it off. Because for one, my voice sounds like, I mean, now I've got a deeper voice than I had then. On those records, it sounds like I've like taken a hit of like helium before I done my vocal take. um, and it's so fast, everything's so fast. So it was, we tried, we did as good a job of it as we could, but it was kind of like, there was a comedy element to it, trying to play songs like that now. Um, the one we still play is Captain, because it's just got such a great riff. It's like a Stooges song or something to me, and straight away kind of always gets the crowd excited. So we still play that sometimes.
Cool. And then, yeah, just in terms of producers, just always interested how, that influences a band and say like what's the difference between someone like Paul Tippler and Dave Aringer to work with?
Well, I mean, I guess like a good producer brings their personality into the band, and like they become part of the band in the time that they're doing the recording. Um, Certainly from that, I've got a limited experience of producers. I've only worked with a handful, but a handful of really good ones. Paul was much more sort of punk rock. He was coming from that background, and he did all our early stuff and really made the band a lot better. I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for making Idlewild kind of like a proper band, because we really couldn't play that well together. We found it mad when we first went to the studio with him that he was making us do things twice, because normally we just play it and that would be it. And he'd be like, "No, you need to do that again." And then he would do it, and he like needs to do it again. And he got us like into the mindset of like how to kind of, you know, make things sound better by practicing a bit more, work on the nuances of things. So he was a very important producer for us early on. And then we worked with Dave for Broken Windows and Remote Part, and he was a different kind of producer, but again, just like really, we learn a lot from him. And he really encouraged Idlewild to kind of bring out our harmony in the way that like I was really interested in melodies and was good at coming up with them, and Rod is a really good harmony singer. So you can really hear that from Broken Windows onwards, how the harmonies and the melodies are really being developed a lot. And that was definitely through Dave's influence on the band. Um, and he worked with us over the years for a lot, because he became like such a close kind of confidant for, creative confidant for the band. And then we worked with Tony Hoffer on Mornings and Promises, and Stephen Street actually once as well. But
Yeah, I didn't
larger
want to
than
ask you
that,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, we did some of the remote part with Stephen. Ended up only actually being one song on the actual album, but about 5 of the B-sides. That's why the B-sides are so good on the remote part, because they're all produced by Stephen Street.
Yeah, but was there a thing around you guys not being happy with the recordings of Stephen Street, maybe not the record label not having them as well or something.
It's more the record label than us. I mean, we demoed quite a few songs, and we went into the studio with Stephen, and obviously Stephen's got a big history with Parlophone, the label we were on, because he did all the Blur records, and obviously the Smiths as well. But so they were like really confident with Stephen, and I just don't know if it wasn't. We had a really good. We were in our studio for 2 weeks and we did 5 songs. And had a really good time. We enjoyed each other's company. We thought the songs were really good. And there was just something about them afterwards. The record label were a bit like, I guess they thought we could maybe just do a bit better. And that wasn't a reflection on Stephen's production or. So we went back and wrote loads more songs, and we wrote You Held the World in Your Arms, American English, Modern May Letting Go. So we wrote all the songs that people know after the Stephen session. So the Stephen session basically was like mainly B-sides that became. So in retrospect, I can see that the songs weren't as good as the songs that we were away to write, and maybe the label had a kind of more of an insight into that, and they just thought this is good, but I think this band are away to write better songs. Let's give them longer to do this record. So subsequently it became the kind of lost Stephen Street session with Idlewild, because we did like 5 songs, but only one of them was on the album, and the rest were B-sides.
Yeah, did you get much feedback from the record label at that point? Did they tell you exactly? Yeah, you get a lot then, yeah.
Yeah, they were spending a lot of money on the band. So, I mean, we were, as I say, they were spending a modest amount on us compared to some. So yeah, the A&R they would be very involved. You'd let them hear everything, demos. Well, you wouldn't get to go into the studio till they were happy with you had the demos that were going to make good songs. And then the songs were, they were not scrutinized. That's too strong a word, but like definitely like if they didn't like them, they told you.
Okay.
And then you would have to work out what you were going to do, whether you were going to like re-record it or write with better ones, or. But they were never done. It was never done in an unpleasant way. It was always done in an encouraging way, and that's why the band got better.
Yeah, I mean, it took about 2 or 3 sessions before they were happy with that particular album, but kind of paid off in the end.
Yeah, because after that we went with Lenny Kaye from the Patti Smith group, I'm a massive Patti Smith fan and Lenny Kaye fan, and we recorded 4 songs with Lenny Kaye in New York when we were touring in America anyway. So it was the end of the tour. We went and did 4 days with him, including the first version of American English. But it was a different sounding thing completely from Stephen Street. And again, the record label were very much like, this is good, but we think you can do better. And then, ultimately they were right, because we did do better. But still, it was frustrating at the time. Because this was like, we'd written lots of songs and everything seemed to not be good enough, kind of. But with hindsight, I can see that they were right.
Yeah, would you choose the producers, and or was it like a collaboration between you and the label?
Yeah, it would be a collaboration. It would be like we'd suggest people, and they would suggest people, and would. Well, with Broken Windows, I loved loads of American and a lot of indie rock records I liked were produced by. Well, they weren't produced; they were recorded by Bob Weston. He was the bass player in Shellac, and so we really wanted to record with him, so our records could sound like all these cool records that we listened to. So we started Broken Windows with Bob. And Bob's an amazing guy, and but it just at the time it wasn't right in terms of like we weren't a good enough band, and we needed some direction, and that wasn't his style. He was just there to record. So that started off badly in terms of the record label. Where then like this is not working out, and that's when Dave Eringa started being involved with Idlewild, and he really turned that around. But the spirit of the Bob Weston session was throughout that whole record. I really do think that Bob's really influenced Broken Windows in that way. And I suppose it's a similar thing with the remote part in Lenny Kaye. He sort of, even though none of the songs that he recorded with us are on the remote part, he had a real influence on that record.
Yeah, yeah. And then just in terms of hitting some pretty classic landmarks, like playing Top of the Pops and stuff, did that mean much to you at the time, or how was that?
Oh yeah, I mean we weren't like, we were excited to do that. We did it about 5 times actually over a space of about 5 years. Yeah, it was weird. It was always a bit of a strange day. It wasn't like in any way glamorous. the studio is tiny, and it's like very much like there's so many people, and it's all quite stressful, and you don't get very long to play the song, and so it wasn't, you know, after the first experience, it wasn't something I would look forward to in terms of like I knew it was going to be kind of a stressful day. But yeah, when you're actually like performing on Top of the Pops, it's exciting. It's like, I mean, nowadays it doesn't mean things. We talk to a younger person about it, it's like nothing to them. But you know, for several generations, it was a big deal, including mine.
No, definitely, yeah. And how would that contrast with something like Letterman? Was there a difference, or
Oh yeah, it was very different. I mean,
is it more live on Letterman? Yeah.
Yeah, Letterman's much more suited for like they've had like live rock bands for like decades. Whereas Top of the Pops didn't really do that. They'd only just started doing that. Mainly it was bands of mind, you know. So it didn't sound great at Top of the Pops because of that. Like it wasn't really suited for like a live band. And I think subsequently they stopped doing that. They went back to miming. So we were unfortunately in that period when they made the bands play live and it sounded shit. So, and then they went, so like all Bewitched and Eight Steps or whatever, they'd sound great. And then like the rock band would come out and sound terrible.
I was watching some mad show you're doing with Dermot O'Leary presenting. Don't know what that was, and he got a woman up on the stage that had been crying at one of your gigs or
Oh
something.
yeah, I remember that. That's embarrassing.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
we did
sure.
quite a lot of TV programs during that time. And there was a lot of can't even remember the name of them. Like there's one called Born Sloppy. There was another, was that a program? Yeah, it was a program.
Rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, there was like there was quite a few of them. And maybe at the end of the time we were, as I say, we were like kind of popular, so we played in quite a lot of. We were never very good at that kind of thing, though. You know, I'm not a performer in that way. Like, I love writing songs and performing them, but I don't perform in the way like I'm not looking for approval or something as a performer. So I tend to kind of sort of just stand there or stand at the side or something. So yeah, it's I always struggled being on TV. Basically, I just didn't really know what I was supposed to do.
No, yeah, fair enough. And
Mm.
then read that you supported U2 at one point. That must have been pretty major. What was that like?
Yeah, we did. We did some gigs with them. We did a tour with REM, like stadium tour with REM, which was amazing because I was a big REM fan well, still am, but like certainly when I was a teenager, I loved them. That was probably more exciting, just in terms of like, um, I guess I'm more of a REM fan than I was a U2 fan. But the thing about U2 was it was just the scale of it, the stadiums and like the production, and yeah, it was really impressive. And just to be part of those evenings was quite exciting. Um, just stadium concerts are like, as a punter, I've only ever been to like one or two. Rolling Stones, REM, seen a few times in stadiums before, played with them. Um, it's a sense of it's like it's different than a gig, isn't it? It's more like an event. Um, so if you're part of that, it is quite exciting, even though a lot of people are just like eating hot dogs or yawning when you're playing.
And then with the Warnings Promises album, I read that that was the first time you've recorded an album in one go. Was that a bit was that quite refreshing at the time, or how did it
Well,
work?
this is a reflection on what I was talking about before, but how we always had to kind of go through the process of um, doing different, you know, sessions with people before everyone was happy, you know, with. And to be honest, Warnings and Promises, we started recording that in Sweden with Dave Eringa, and we did 2 weeks in Sweden in Malmo and Tambourine Studios, which is owned by the Cardigans. It's a really cool little studio. Um, we did 2 weeks there with Dave Eringa, and we thought these are great songs, and Dave and I and us have made some great records together. So, but again, the studio were the label were a bit like, we think you can, we think there's better songs than this. So we're like, oh, and then they were like, we think we should do it with a different producer. And they suggested Tony Hoffer, because Tony Hoffer had just worked with Supergrass and also Air, um, records that Parlophone had put out. So we were like, okay. We're a bit like skeptical because we'd had a real kind of fondness for working with Dave. But then they were like, Tony just works in LA at Sunset Sound. And we were like, that sounds pretty good to go to Sunset Sound's a legendary studio. So yeah, we went over there for 2 months. This is again, it shows you how much, I guess, budget there was in the record industry then, because now that wouldn't happen. But yeah, so we went over there for 2 months and recorded the whole record. Yeah, so that was pretty much the first time I'd like dedicated, recorded and mixed in that 2 months period. So yeah, that was the first Idlewild record on like that.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously around that time, you know, we talk a lot about on the podcast about the UK indie scene kicking off around that time. And I saw you did an NME tour in those mid 2000s. How like taken were you with that scene or any bands from that time? Oh, not really. I don't know.
What do you mean? Like what kind of?
I don't know. You mentioned the Strokes. Like, were you like into any of those bands, particularly around the early 2000s?
Oh, I love the Strokes. And when I was lucky enough to see them on the first tour, like Heaven, I think in London they played.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that record was like. Actually, weirdly, I remember because we went to America a lot around that time. Idlewild to play gigs. I remember on the flight over to New York, the A&R man from our band, well, Matthew, Idlewild's A&R man, he was going to America too. He was on the same flight, and he said, "You should have listened to this. This is like an EP by a band that's just been signed to, I can't remember, Rough Trade or whatever." And it was the Strokes, and I had like a Discman, so it was a CD. It was the Modern Age EP, and I just listened to that. I thought, this is really up my street. I loved it. You know, like, I really loved. It referenced loads of stuff that I liked anyway, like Television and other New York bands, but it just had this kind of contemporary sound to it and just amazing tunes. So I was a fan since that point, you know, and I saw a lot. I say I'm lucky to see them a few times in that early tour. The EAA is another band that I really liked. Again, I saw them in a club in New York, probably around that same time. They're probably my two favorite bands from that era. Um, I thought they made some brilliant records, both those bands, and you know, continue to be brilliant live bands. You know, I've not seen the Strokes for a number of years, but yeah, he is. I saw him not that long ago. Just brilliant, brilliant original American music.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Any memories of like NME Awards or anything like that, or Kerrang Awards
Um, no,
or Brit
I mean
Awards?
we didn't get nominated for any, so I went to that. I went to a couple of things. I went to the NME Awards once. Um, I wasn't nominated. I think I just went. And I just remember I was sitting beside Graham Coxon, who's I got to know a wee bit and I really like as a person. So that was fun. Krang Awards, I think maybe went to once or twice. I mean, I'm not that kind of guy, really. I would just be trying to find an excuse to leave. Um, so yeah, and that we never won any award. I've never won any awards. So no, I'm not like well, we weren't really on the award radar.
Ah, fair enough. Then in terms of artwork, am I right in thinking you're quite influential in terms of that? The band's artwork?
Idlewild's artwork.
Yeah.
Well, I've mainly done all the artwork for the band.
Right, right.
I'm obviously interested in visual art and my photography. Well, my failed photography career. I dropped out after 2 years, but so I took the pictures for a lot of the singles and some of the albums, and then would come up with the concepts for other ones and work with people, you know, designers and stuff, because I don't have any design talent. I'm just good at visualizing things and taking pictures of things. So yeah, I mean that's very important to me. It's like it's another artistic outlet. And it's also part of the band. That's what I love about bands. It's not just the music. It's the performance, the live performance. It's like the artwork. It's the videos or visual content or whatever you call it now. It's just the way you present yourself, the clothes you wear, or the clothes you choose, like whatever the anti-style. It's like, it's everything about a band is it's numerous artistic mediums working together to create something that's really truly unique. So I'm a big fan of being in a band and of also bands. I think, I'm invested in it.
Yeah, would you get involved in the music videos and stuff as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd never directed any because I don't have those kind of talents, but yeah, we'd always be kind of all right. We did a lot of good music videos with two friends of ours called James and Alex. So they made like Discourage and When Our Guess Shapes and Wooden Ideas and American English, and they made a lot of our music videos. They were just similar age, similar interests, artistically, kind of like same reference points. So we'd make a lot of videos together.
Yeah, and then just in terms of yeah, is it leaving Parlophone or the end of that contract? Did that feel like a big deal at the time, or we're not too concerned?
Oh, I mean, it was a huge deal at the time. I mean, we weren't surprised because we knew that we'd signed for 4 albums and we'd made 4 albums, and ultimately we'd not performed commercially as well as they maybe expected or wanted. And that was just because, we were label mates with like Kylie Minogue and Coldplay and Radiohead and Blur. Obviously we were at the bottom of that pile. Although we still did well, comparatively, we did really well. We sold a lot of records and played big places, but so we knew that we weren't surprised when we realized that they weren't going to take up the option and re-sign us to. But we'd had such a great journey on them that yeah, we're really grateful to all the people there. We had a really wonderful experience on Parlophone and Food Records and all the people that we met too. And it put the band in a position where we could sign to independent labels and we, but ultimately that coincided with the music industry sort of collapsing as streaming became so popular. I mean, Spotify started in 2006, and that was roughly the time that we um, stopped being on a record label. So um, we navigated it for a few years, and then we took a break, and then when we came back, we just do everything ourselves now, really. Although our new record's on V2 Records, which is cool. So we're actually signed to a label again 30 years later.
Yeah, how did that come around then?
Well, again, it's just we made the record and um, we just let a few people hear it. We were keen to talk to people if they wanted to put out, our distributors, and they ended up V2 were really keen to put out. So it's nice because they could be able to promote it properly, and hopefully it'll do well.
Yeah, it does seem like more of a thing now. Like bands will record an album and then get signed, type thing.
That's how it happens now, I think. Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky in that way that Rod from the band has a studio, which he runs as a commercial studio. Like that was his thing he's been doing for 10 years. So we record there, so we can record our record pretty much well, very very economically, and have it all done. And it's not like it used to be obviously the record company would pay for the recording, but now it goes the other way. But obviously that's bad if you don't have any access to recording. But then again, nowadays you can record a good sounding record with a couple of mics and an interface on your laptop, so that's changed as well for a really in the positive, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And like I say, you were able to work with Dave Arringe still on 3 more albums after you left Parlophone. So is that kind of a similar setup in terms of recording at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was we were still going into studios, hiring studios. Obviously, studios you'd have to, like everyone everyone had less money, so studios had to be cheaper. Or you had to go to cheaper studios. Everyone had to work for less money, and just accept rather not expect that well, you just accept things were going to be different to how they were, and that's fine because things should change. Everything comes in phases in life, and phases have to end, and then a new one starts. And when you accepted that, it was like it was fine. You just had to it was a new way of working, and you could be creative in a different way. So yeah, we did. I must say the last 2 records before we took the hiatus in 2010 were probably the least inspired. Not like they're bad records, but I think that I've taken a break was really important to kind of creatively sort of reset. So the records we made since then, since 2014, when we got back playing again, have been much more interesting, I think, than the two just previous. That's just my opinion, though. I mean, like obviously, like some people think they're good, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I just mean like from my point of view.
No, I was enjoying making Otherworld today.
Yeah, I think it's Make Another World. Is like it is good. I'm not slagging it. I feel like I'm slagging it. I'm not. It's got some really good songs. I mean, we still play a lot of the songs live. Ghost in the Arcade and Make Another World and in Competition for the Worst Time. They sound great when we play them live, and they are really. We did spend time with all of our records. We've always spent they're always we've done as best as we could at the time. Do you know what I mean? We're never like, we put everything into it while we're working on them. And sometimes you're more inspired than other times, I suppose.
Yeah, and you mentioned the hiatus. Like, did you know at that point that you'd come back together at some point? You just needed to do other projects, maybe.
Yeah, I just think we felt that we needed to kind of we felt, I think that ultimately the feeling was one, we knew that the record that we made next, if we just went straight away from Post Electric Blues and not the touring that we did, if we went straight into a record, that it wasn't going to be, I think it would always have been, there's a certain standard that we set, so I think it would have been good, but I just think it would have been a bit uninspired. There was other factors at play as well, because people had like families and like people had, we've never lived in the same place for years, so all the band lived in different places, and we just kind of went into our own corners of wherever we lived, and I made solo records, and that was really important for me to kind of start to be creative in a different way with different people and explore different types of music and different words and ways of writing words, and um so yeah, and that was also when I moved up to the Hebrides, so I was like, I really changed my life really in that way. And everyone had similar experiences. Like Colin, the drummer, moved to Canada for a year with his wife, who's Canadian, and so when we actually came back together, like we felt like we'd all done quite a lot, and there was lots to catch up on, and just even just not seeing your friends for a wee while, you're just kind of excited, and that kind of, it's like palpable, and it goes into the creative work that you're doing. So everything ever written, the record that we did, it's like now it sounds like it's kind of all over the place. It's like different styles of music and lots of different people involved in it, but it's a reflection of the way we felt, that we're kind of excited to be doing it again, you know?
Yeah, has that been the catalyst for the latest album? Obviously, 6 years since your last one.
Yeah, I kind of. I mean, it, we weren't intending for it to be so long a break, but what happened was the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm.
We finished Interview Music Tour in 2019, and we were planning on recording and writing into 2020, but that just got, nothing happened there, obviously. And then the following year, nothing much happened, and it really did sort of, it was about 2022, 23 till we actually started. Actually, it was doing the remote part. We did a few shows for the remote part's 20th anniversary, the end of 2022, and that really focused the band into getting back and writing songs and just being a band again. So when we actually got down to it, it didn't take too long to write songs and record them. It was just, it took quite a few years to kind of, um, you know, and that wasn't necessarily the band's fault. Because, like I say, it was like a global pandemic and lockdowns and stuff. Everyone was trying to cope and find a way through it. So, and we did, and I think our new record is I think it's really a really strong piece of work, and it's like it references lots of our older records too, and I think it's something that Idlewild fans really like.
Okay. Yes. Well, yeah, let's finish on some fan questions then. Grieving band say amazing band. What's Roddy's top three songs from across their career?
Um, well, I don't know. I'm not the best person to ask really, but you should really ask an Idlewild. Um, I'm not like, I mean, I'm not. I don't mean like I'm not an Idlewild fan, but like I'm so involved in them that my choices are. I suppose like, okay, definitely I'd say "You Held the World in Your Arms." It's like somewhat of our kind of signature tune, isn't it? And it's done so much for us, and given us so many opportunities. And I love the way that I can remember writing it and all that kind of stuff. It's so definitely I'd include that one. Little Discouraged from Broken Windows, another song that I remember writing, and remember writing it thinking this is really good. This is better than anything we've done. And that opened up lots of doors, and we've there's not been a show we've not played that song. Same with World in Your Arms, we played them, and they always get a good reaction. So those two, and then I'd probably go something older, maybe like, yeah, I'd maybe even go Captain, because I think that again when we wrote that, it was like when we put that song together and played it for the first time, which is probably the day after we wrote it. Um, people straight away reacted to it, and we thought, wow, this has got an ability. We've got an ability together to collaborate on these ideas that people are responding to, and it's that just like that sort of fizz of artistic excitement. I can still hear that a bit when I hear that song, you know. So there's probably more, but there's the first three that come to my head.
Yeah, do you find those songs come together the quickest sometimes as well? Like the
Yeah, I
best
do. I
songs?
mean, it's a bit of a kind of not a cliche, but like a lot of you watch a lot of those VH1 behind the music, where those documentaries, people are always saying, "Yeah, I just sat down and it just came out on the guitar," kind of thing. But I mean, my own experience that's happened a few times. Yeah, like um, popular songs, well-known songs by Idlewild were written quite quickly, and not because like we were like just accepting the first thing that came to like literally you'd sit down and write it and you're thinking that's really good. Should we carry on working on it or just leave it and like just leave it? Like American English was like that. That was very much probably 15 minutes or something. I mean, I say that 50 minutes for like the melodies and like the basic words. Obviously, I worked on the words much more than that. And when we recorded it, we spent days on it trying to make it sound good. But the initial idea of what is essentially the song, the exchange of idea, didn't take too long.
Cool. And then Dave Laser says, how pissed off were you at Outkast when they called that album Idlewild? Be honest.
Well, I don't really, I remember I'm kind of like one of these people that's sort of old fashioned in the way I sort of don't really like, I'm not online a lot. I don't notice a lot of things, you know. And I actually saw a poster for it on like the a bus stop, when I was driving past somewhere in Glasgow. Idlewild, like just Outkast Idlewild. That was the first time and then like, yeah, then I heard like, oh yeah, they've called her. I don't know. I mean, obviously they'd never heard of Idlewild, the band, so they would have, um, or maybe they hadn't, they just didn't care. I mean, it used to be the name of John F. Kennedy Airport, so it's not an obscure thing. Like for, I mean, millions of people for many years flew through Idlewild Airport in New York. So it's not an obscure word, particularly not in America. Um, so no, I mean it's used um, by a lot of people for a lot of things. We were just lucky that at the time when we named our band that, not many people knew of it as a word. But
Yeah, yeah. And then one last one from Michael Kafaki on Twitter. Just says, would there be any desire from the band to do a 100 Broken Windows anniversary type tour?
well, we've done that before.
Okay.
We did that on the we did that for its 10th anniversary or maybe 15th, 2010, 15th, no, 10th, 2010. EMI reissued shortly before we took our hiatus. Actually, EMI reissued Broken Windows with a bonus disc of all the like outtakes and demos and stuff. And we did 4 gigs around the UK. We did like Manchester, Glasgow, London, and Edinburgh, I think. So we did that, yeah. And no, I don't think we'll do that again because we play a lot of the songs at a normal gig. Um, I don't think we've done that with the remote parts a few times, and it's always a great evening for fans and also for the band. But ultimately, I'd much rather work on new material and incorporate that with a selection of all the old songs. I think that's a lot healthier a gig than just playing like a one album and then like sort of separating it in a weird way. It's a weird way to see music, I think.
Yeah, I saw you
So
did that thing back, I think it was in the 2000s. You played like each album in full over a few nights.
yeah, we
Uh,
did like 5 nights at King Tut's, which is a club in Glasgow. And we did like, yeah, we did every song we'd ever written over 5 nights.
yeah, it's
I
always
don't know
quite cool
why
when
we
a band
did
do it that
that
way.
really. I think it was just a case of like, um, it's maybe to prove that we could, or like, or like, it's curious to think about it. Like, why would we do that? But we learned every single song we'd ever written and played them over 5 nights, and we never did it again. It was just like, yeah, it was a while ago though. It was like 2007, I think that was. So.
Yeah, yeah. Then yeah, just a couple for me to finish on. I always like to ask if people can have a funny story about a big name in music or some kind of anecdote. I don't know really.
No, I don't like no funny ones anyway. I mean, I've been lucky enough to meet lots of famous musicians, but like I say, I'm not the kind of guy that's like hanging out, sort of wanting to, share funny stories with people. Um, I think all the people that I met that I admired, I literally said, "I think you're great," or "I love your records," or something like that. Then disappeared back into the shadows.
Yeah, fair enough. What was someone like Bono like? Did you get to meet him or anything?
I just said hi.
Yeah, fair play.
He seemed nice. He said hi back.
Yes. All right. Well, yeah. Just two more then. I always ask people what's been the high point so far, and is there anything you do differently?
There's nothing I do differently because then it wouldn't have been the same story. You know what I mean? Obviously, there'd be things that. So no, I would never do anything differently. I think it's worked out the way it's supposed to. High point. I mean, I think one of the high points is the fact that I'm still talking to interviewers and the records are still getting interest and we're still selling out shows and the record's being played on the radio 30 years after we formed. I mean, that to me is a massive thing. It's like I said at the start when we started chatting, like there's never any careerist notion with Idlewild. The idea of making being able to make music into a career in the mid 90s when we formed was, it just didn't seem possible. So the fact that I've basically spent my life being able to make a living and being creative and writing songs and is a bit of a miracle to me. Um, so the high point is that I'm still doing that, and people are still interested.
Yeah, I mean, it must be pretty great feeling to have, worked in music your entire life, like formed a career out of it. Because
Yeah, well, one thing is I've never thought of it as a career, and I think that's probably a positive thing. So I've never got jaded by it, or I've never. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's tough sometimes to be creative, and you'll be very resourceful nowadays. But um, yeah, I've always approached every record that I've ever done as like it's the first time I've done it, and also possibly the last time I'll do it. So because of that, I think there's always like I put everything into it in terms of like all my ideas and I make it as good as I possibly can. And I think that keeps it fresh for me as well. Thinking like I never get too kind of complacent or about what I've done or what I can do. It's like I still feel like I'm still learning about being in a band. And I still don't take it for granted at all. Like I love the fact that people still want to come and see us play, and the concerts are always really, really fun for that reason. Um, there's never really been much pretension to Idlewild, and I also think that's something that's um, done us a lot of favors. There's always been kind of a goodwill towards the band because of that too.
yeah. And then obviously your new album out in October, followed by a tour, which looks like it's getting on for being sold out. But yeah, I don't know if you've covered it, but why is this album a self-titled one?
Well, there was a number of reasons. One, all the titles I suggested, no one liked. Some of them were pretty rubbish actually, but not rubbish, but just a bit kind of maybe a bit pretentious. And ultimately, we just came to the conclusion. I actually suggested that halfway through. I was like, why don't we just self-title it then? And everyone was a bit like, nah. And then as we kind of moved through the 2 weeks of recording, everyone was like coming around to the idea more, just simply because it felt like we'd not made a record for a while, we'd been a band for 30 years. The record sort of sounded like different Idlewild records. It was sort of referencing ourselves and that, like I said before there. It felt like it worked just being self-titled. And it's no more complicated than that, really. It wasn't like a statement. It was more to do with the fact that when we finished the record and we sat down, hadn't had a few options for other titles, it really felt that was the one that suited it the best. So we just decided to do it. And also, it's quite nice to have a self-titled record in your repertoire. Like a lot of my favorite bands, the Smiths and Blur, and loads of bands that I like have a self-titled record in there. So this is our one.